So your question was, what inspires me to speak about science and to study about the defects of the atheistic science? Well, they have a worldview. Science is not just applied science, discovering things and finding out, how to manipulate molecules and atoms and electronic signals and so on to enhance so-called quality of life. But they've taken the position of authority on origins of life, the origins of the universe, and what they've inserted into the academic world and the institutions, educational institutions. They've inserted an atheistic worldview, and they have their acharyas. For example, Charles Darwin, he's one of the main acharyas, and he said that he assumed that somehow molecules produce life. So he started from primitive life, and he depicted that the various species of life are on a tree of life. And we have one original ancestor, which was very primitive, like a E. coli, a unicellular organism. And gradually, based on natural selection, forced upon or inserted upon genetic mutations, gradually there was upgrades of the organism. They developed eyes, and gradually they developed over millions of years limbs and more advanced types of breathing apparatus like lungs, and they developed a heart, and then from one species upgraded to a higher species, and humans are at the top of the ladder. So first of all, the fossil records, which they've been looking at for 150 years, deposes or uh, disputes this idea of this gradual, slow, over millions of years Darwinian tree where all the species of life have been developed. So the fossil records, for example, 533 million year geological strata, they've found what is called the Cambrian explosion. They call it the Cambrian era, where many different fauna and various animals like trilobites and so on suddenly appeared in this strata of geological strata. And they all suddenly appeared. It's called a Cambrian explosion. And recently in China, they discovered an area of 533 million years ago, a Cambrian area in the fossil strata, in the evolving strata. They found the same evidence of what is called status. It means that the records, the fossil records, they look more like grass, like each animal appears with all its different morphological elements and components, and they don't have any precursory types of ancestors in the Precambrian ages within the fossil record. So they call it the Cambrian explosion. They've also discovered the same with birds. There's the avian explosion, where birds suddenly appear in the fossil records. So paleontologists have been pushing this idea, but the fossil record screams loudly that there's no Darwinian tree being discovered, and it's screaming at them. So people like Niles Eldredge and his companion at I believe MIT, they promoted this idea of punctuated equilibrium. They're always trying to make an adjustment to explain away the problems, the anomalies, and so on. Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge came up with punctuated equilibrium, that there's just very slow, almost unnoticeable little things going on with the animals, And then there's suddenly a sudden explosion of development, morphological development. That was their theory, but many of their peers have really pushed back against that theory. So Michael Cremo, my godbrother, Judah Karma Prabhu, he produced a book called Hidden History of the Human Race. And in there, he's extracted from various museums of natural history anomalies and big gaps in the fossil records, or wrong order fossils where you'll find evidence of modern human fossils or artifacts in very ancient, like millions of years ago, geological strata. So he came out with this book, The Hidden History of the Human Race, which was very popular. And it's a polemic, or it exposes the claim that the fossil record is demonstrating the veracity of Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection on genetic mutation. So that's one problem they have, is paleontology. The paleontologists have been searching and searching, like I say, 150 years, to try and prove this point of evolution, what they call natural evolution or biological evolution, without any need for God, the hand of God, divine designer, or anything like that. Of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, we present the argument that this is descending knowledge from top to bottom, and the great sages and God himself can write a book. He can give us information. So the Bhagavad Gita, this ancient historical classic of India, says that aham bija pradapita sarvayonishi kuntiya, that I'm the source of all the various species of life, and I'm the seed-giving father. And so there are indications that there is a supreme being behind our universe. It's called intelligent design. That when we look at science under the microscope, when we look inside of a cell, we see that the cell is operating like a massive city full of little machines called nanomachines, and that they're working based on what is called information content. In other words, in the last 50 or 60 years since Watson and Crick, 1953, I guess, they discovered that within the cell, the nucleus of the cell, you have information. They're called nucleic bases, and they act like little digits, just like in a book you have the alphabet, they're little digits, and they express information, like the house is red. You have these letters, House, and so on, which actually have no real meaning unless put in a specific way. So they found specificity inside of your nucleus of your cell. And this information informs information. It informs within the cell how to make different nanomachines, like protein molecules, for example, or enzymes. The DNA is an instruction to construct various types of molecules which go around and they do different jobs. Some of them are like little carpenters. They fix things inside of the cell. The mitochondria needs repairing. You have a cell membrane, which is a double membrane, and it has little portals which accept certain elements, certain nutrients, and so on. And it also rejects certain things that may be malefic to the cell. So the whole cell is surviving because of this information that's going on constantly. And we have trillions of these little alphabets, A, T, G, and C, nucleic acids, and they're a string. And on that string, there's a genome. At each part of the string, you have a genome which instructs, okay, this activity has to be done, that activity has to be done. You want to produce different types of cells which produce different types of tissues. So you have lung tissues, you have heart tissues, you have muscle tissues, you have fat tissues. All this is going on inside each tiny little of the trillions of cells in your body. Darwin, he didn't understand it. He didn't know this. They didn't have any kind of instruments that could detect all these workings in the city called the cell. And so he said, oh, the cell is just like some jelly, some gelatin, a bag of jello, basically. And it does very simple, primitive things. And gradually, the speciation goes on because of natural selection, working on the genetic mutation. That's all he knew. So he actually admitted that when it comes to the eye, with all its complex components, so the eye emits certain kinds of light. It has to concentrate the light on the retina. So many different details are there within, say, something like an eye, which really challenges this idea of natural selection on genetic mutation. We also find that if you want to, say, build some kind of a machine, all the parts are very specific. So this idea of, grabbing a piece of metal here and another piece of metal there and having some nuts and bolts and you get like a lawnmower is ridiculous. Each part is designed specifically and engineered specifically by a dream team of engineers working for Ford or whoever, whatever company, industrial companies. And it's based on information on a blueprint, how to build a lawnmower or a car or anything. For example, if I gave you the components to make a car, 30,000 parts, say, and I laid them down on this lawn, I say, okay, give me a car. Unless you're a trained engineer and you've studied, mechanical engineering and so on and all the forces that are involved, and all the different kinds of arrangements you have to make and the specificity of each little part of that car and how it works to service the whole, you'd be lost. It's not random. You can't just randomly. So even if you had the basic building blocks of a living cell, even if you had them, which they haven't been actually able to produce as yet, from ab initio, from scratch, not from borrowing from nature, but from scratch. There's 4 basic building blocks of life. Proteins, for example, you have different types of proteins. So you need proteins. You need sugars, or what they call carbohydrates or polysaccharides. These are all kind of sugars. They're energy molecules. And then you need the fatty acids or the lipids, which is what the membrane is made of around the cell. And then you have to have the nucleic acids on which you can store a lot of information. Just like this book, I have paper and I write down the directions to get to the temple of Vedic Planetarium is as follows. You go up here, you turn left, you follow the road down, you go along the river road and so on. So that information I can put on paper. And then I can go to my computer and I can upload that information from the paper onto a hard drive. And from the hard drive, I can upload it into a little box somewhere. And then that box can send it into a cloud. And then it can go over to any country in the world and it's downloaded onto someone's computer. And then he can write it down on a piece of paper. So the nucleic acids are holding all this information. There's all kinds of information inside of a cell. It's not the medium that matters, the acids, but the way it's organized. Just like if you have a manual, how to build a bicycle, that it's the information in the manual that's important, not the medium itself, the book, the manual, whatever you want to call it. So similarly, information is an abstract. If I write house, the house is red. It's an abstract. You can visualize it in your mind, but the house is not on my paper, but piece of paper here. So all this information comes usually from, we know from our current experience that information comes from a brain, from a mind, from a designer. So our argument is that now that they've discovered all this information, and Watson and Crick in 1958 said, it's working like digital code in a computer. The DNA is a coding system which expresses an idea, make some carbohydrates, make an enzyme, etc., etc., construct something, and then little machines are made to construct something, transport a certain molecule from this part of the cell to another part of the cell. Those are microtubules. And once the transportation job is done, some proteins are made, and they come and they chop up the microtubules. Why is that? Because if the microtubules were left there just like conveyor belts, they're kind of like conveyor belts in a factory, the cell would become so rigid that it would die. So right away you go, wow, someone must have designed these little fine details and fine tuning in the cell that it would operate properly. And the cell, when it splits, it carries the information in both sides, reproducing cells. It reproduces itself, and it carries the information from the parent to the child cell. So all these things are going on as we speak within our bodies. Millions of interactomes are happening as we speak. And the question is, it looks like when you have a city, you have a city planner. When you have a machine or a factory, you have people who designed it and who operate it and so on. So our argument against atheism is that this stuff cannot happen by blind molecules, blind matter. As they say, matter gives rise to life, bottom up. That's their argument. We say, no, it's top down. That there is a brain, an engineer, a supreme being. We call him Krishna. And in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Maya dakshena prakriti suyate sa characharam hetunanena kunteya. That I, by my superintendence, Maya dakshena, by my supervision, the whole world is going on. In the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he also says, I enter into all the planets and maintain their orbits. And then in the next verse in that chapter, he says, I enter into the moon and supply the life-bearing juices in all planets and all plants. So here Krishna is telling us, why do we believe? Well, this is an act of faith. Why do we have a leap of faith? We take a leap of faith because when we start chanting the Hare Krishna mantra under the guidance of a bona fide acharya, a bona fide spiritual master, a bona fide preceptor, we experience the presence of God. It's a subjective experience. So that is the problem. Krishna is known as a dokshaja. He cannot be detected by the external instruments or the empirical approach. Empiricism means that you can poke something and come up with, some conclusion. You can mix something, some chemicals, and come up with a conclusion. But Krishna says, Name prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavritaha mudhoyam nabijanati mamebhyam paramavyam. I don't show myself. I don't manifest prakasha. I don't enlighten you with my presence if you're muda, if you're ignorant, if you're foolish, and if you're atheistic. He says, you're covered by my maya, my illusory energy. You're covered by my illusory energy. So that's the way God works. You have your free will, and if you choose to be forgetful of God or deny the existence of God, you can come up with so many different philosophies and worldviews and ideas. But when we look at science, which is the dominant authority on the planet today, is science, material science. Actually, Socrates said that science comes from the word scientia, which means to know. And he said you should know thyself. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it describes that the soul is non-material, it's antimatter. And it's being suspended in the 5 pranas which flow through the heart. And as the heart travels, the blood travels through the heart, it picks up consciousness, and consciousness is spread throughout the body, just as the rays of the sun are spread throughout the universe by the sun. Yata prakashati ekam kritsnam lokam imam ravi. Ravi means the sun. Kshetram kshetra tata kritsnam. That the kshetra, this body, the field of activities, the kshetra, is illuminated. Prakashyanti sarvasaha is illuminated by the immortal soul. So that is our paradigm. That is our model. And it's being given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you want to discover the existence of God, you have to accept a bona fide professor, an authority who has experienced God and who can guide you through. But the atheistic people, they say, Asatyam Apatita, there's no God. And we're going to explain all reality in terms of chemicals and atoms and molecules. Of course, nowadays, because of the advancement of material science, modern science, they discovered that even carbohydrates are full of information, that information or coding always comes from a mind. That's their experience. So the science is screaming to us, is telling us, why don't you follow the science? That all information, which is kind of the foundation of all the different types of molecular parts in the cell, all the different types of cells, which produce all the different types of tissues, which produce all the give rise to all the different types of organs, which then gives you a nice body of different types. That all that is based on fundamentally the coding within each cell. And code always comes from a brain, from a designer, from a mind. So Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matah sarvam pravartate. I'm the source of both the spiritual and material worlds. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, more elaborately in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he explains the process of creation, both speciation and planetary creation, how it happens. And the other scriptures, Vedic scriptures, express and elaborate on the different aspects within our creation. The higher planets, is there life on other planets? Are there aliens much more sophisticated and beautiful than we are? Are there lesser planets? Are there lower places? Is there heavens? Is there all these things are described in the Srimad Bhagavatam and described also in the Bhagavad Gita how the process works, how the how people are influenced, and what are the enemies of the mind, and so on. Like the 6 enemies are lust, anger, greed, kam, krodh, lobh, illusion that I am of the body, illusion that I'm very intelligent and I know everything. That's moha, illusion that I identify with this biological machine called the body. And moha, mada, madness. Like people do things that are self-destructive. That's madness. And moha, mada, and matsarya. In this world, there's so much envy of others. You know, the capitalists against the communists, different races against other races, different nations against other nations, gender against gender, race against, so many different types of religions against religions. So envy, these are the 6 highway robbers, or the 6 enemies of self-realization. Kam, krodh, lobh, moha, mada, matsarya. So Krishna in the 16th chapter also describes there's 2 types of human beings. There's the Sura and the Asura. So Asura means that some persons just have a predilection towards atheism. And they're known as demons or rakshasas. And they're bewildered by Krishna's external or illusory energy, Maya. Daivi yesha gunamayi mama maya duratya, that people are influenced by this illusion and they're caught up in trying to acquire material possessions. They're trying to get pleasure through their senses, unlimited, unfettered pleasure through their senses. Lust, it's called lust. And greed, they want more and more for prestige, false pride. They want to accumulate. They want to be at the top of the heap. I'm a multi-billionaire. I have so many servants. I can do anything I want. I have freedom because I'm so wealthy and powerful. This is all described by Krishna in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he describes the quality of demoniac persons. He also describes the quality of saintly people. So our business in today's world is try to turn the clock, turn the pendulum back towards saintliness, to teach people how to become peaceful and saintly, and to understand that we all have, existentially, we have a relationship with God. And science has actually, quantum mechanics has made a contribution, or kind of opened up the door to inquiry into theology and spirituality by Niels Bohr, Max Planck, Schrödinger, and Heisenberg. They suddenly realized that subjectivity, which is a symptom of the soul, is very important in subatomic research. And they understand that on the subatomic level, matter behaves like energy or like particles, particle physics. And so it's a wave or it's a particle. Schrodinger's cat, very famous idea. Is it dead? Is it alive? Everything is what is called uncertainty principle. And so material world, down to its most microscopic elements, is non-deterministic. You just can't put your finger on it. It could be a wave. It could be a particle. It's non-deterministic. It's tentative. It's ephemeral. It's always changing. And so Niels Bohr, he started investigating ancient wisdom of the Chinese and realized that there's part of us that's non-material, called the soul, the consciousness characterized by emotions, feelings, free will, perception of pain and pleasure, cannot be approached by their experimental tools, electronic microscopes and so on, or telescopes. You can't detect the soul that way. But by chanting Hare Krishna, by practicing this Bhakti Yoga sincerely and associating with people who are experienced in this science of Bhakti Yoga, you can certainly develop an understanding of your non-material self. You can understand that there is a supreme self, a supreme being who put us all together, who engineered and designed and engineered our entire cosmos, and that our cosmos, which is billions of miles across in diameter, is just a tiny little seed, mustard seed, in a whole bag of cosmoses or galaxies and so on. And people want to know about these things, but we cannot get this through our teeny little brains or the brains of these scientists. We have to accept the descending process, a disciplic succession. So Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita that he spoke to the sun god 2 million years ago. Imam Vishvashvate Yogam Proktava Mahamavyayam Vivishvan Manave Prahur Manir Ikshvakave. So Krishna says, I spoke this great science of devotion to God, this science of Bhakti Yoga, this whole science of how to experience and love God, to the sun god, Vivishvan. And he spoke it to Manu, his son. And then Manu passed it down to Ikshvaku, who was a king on this planet. And then Ikshvaku passed it down. So this is the process of the master to disciple. Disciple becomes master, passes it down to his disciples. This perfect knowledge. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I'm the source of knowledge. Sarvasya chaham ridishani vishto. Krishna says, as God, I can expand myself in the hearts of all living beings, whether they're insects or birds or mammals or fish. He's in the heart of all living beings in the form of supersoul, just as the sun's particles are spread everywhere. It's completely covering the entire part of the universe. So like that, Krishna is stated by authorities that Krishna is in everyone's heart. He himself says in the Bhagavad Gita, I'm in everyone's heart. But he also says that he's spread everywhere in every atom. Maya tatamidam sarvam. So this type of understanding is only given to those who are innocent, humble, and receptive, and they're not challenging or belligerent to the existence of God and soul. And many, many people are searching for truth because they realize that these philosophies of natural materialism, as they call it, I'm a naturalist, I'm a Marxist, I'm an atheist. These things have been going on for millennia and millennia, clothed in different colors and shapes. But it's all atheism, and atheists are basically against God. And Krishna describes that in the Bhagavad Gita. And they come up with all these theories and and they're very stubborn about it. It's actually their religion. It's the religion of no God. It's an act of faith. Science also, people have to take a leap of faith to say that unequivocally evolution happened. That, the mechanism of natural selection, nature is selecting from genetic mutation, and gradually you get a horse coming from a goat or something. It takes a lot of faith to believe this stuff. It takes a lot of faith that from a big explosion, 14 billion years ago, that the universe cooled down. All these planets with their orbits and their specific masses and so on are going on in a very orchestrated way, and we have oxygen, which is needed for life. We have nutrients in the ground, which is needed for life. We have, sunlight, which is completely and required for life to exist. Is it all like we live in a teleological universe where purpose is being served at every moment, and we say, "Oh, it all happened by accident." So Prabhupada said, "Is your death an accident?" The death rate is 100%. So no, nothing is an accident. Everything is being run. If you see a machine, Prabhupada said, there's an engineer behind it. So our business in the Hare Krishna movement is to push back, to present polemics and repudiate this atheistic scientism which is going on, and professors and scientists are intimidated when we push back on them, when we counter-argue with their ideas, which are pure speculation. They haven't been conclusively demonstrated that, cows come from goats and so on and so forth. It's never been demonstrated. And in conclusion, I can say the fossil evidence certainly refutes it and debunks it. And even the top evolutionists in the world, in Europe and so on, are admitting that we need to review Darwin's theory of evolution. But because it's a kind of religion, they're cemented, they're entrenched in this belief. It's coming from an emotional place. We believe there's no reason to accept God. There's no proof of God, and so on. Well, God is not so cheap that you can challenge him and then he has to come and appear before you. He has to reveal himself to you. So again, he says, Namam duskritina mudha prapadinte naradhama mayaya aparitagyana asuram bhavam ashritaha. The different types of men or humans, they are mischievous. They're duskritina. They're mischievous, envious, you can say evil, and they're propagating throughout the universe, throughout the world here, they're propagating atheism. Don't believe in God. They're envious of God, basically, deep within themselves. they have a real fury of envy against God. Hiranyakashipu is a great example. Ravana, another great example. Kamsa, they're just envious. They just can't stand to hear that someone believes in the Supreme Being. It boils their blood. So our blood boils when they propagate this misinformation and they lie to students in the textbooks, graduate textbooks. They have this primordial soup model, which is that many millions of years ago, perhaps billions of years ago, at the beginning of life, you had a lake full of chemicals, ammonia and all primitive chemicals, and a bolt of lightning struck this lake, and over a short period of time, creepy, crawling little creatures came crawling out of this lake, and that was the beginning of life. But they have no idea, and they're not even close to synthesizing in their sophisticated laboratories. They have no idea how to even synthesize from scratch, ab initio, not born from nature. From scratch, they have no idea how to produce the 4 building blocks of life. They're very specific. They have to be a certain chirality. That means amino acids, they have to be left-handed. Not most molecules are stereochiral. The right side is a mirror image of the left side, just like my left hand, when you put it in the mirror, you see your right hand. And you can't take a right-handed glove and put it on a left hand. So most molecules in the cell, like for example, a functional protein molecule requires left-handed amino acids. They have no idea how to synthesize that from scratch. And then you have the carbohydrates, which are highly kinetic. They're always grabbing stuff in the environment. So they're always oxidizing or grabbing different gases. They're very kinetic or unstable. And they have to be, their components, the polysaccharides and so on, they have to be right-handed, homochiral. So you have that problem, which they haven't solved. Even with their top Nobel Award-winning chemists or biologists like Jack Saltstack, Dennis Miller, these guys are pushing this idea that chemicals give rise to life. They can't even do it in a multi-million dollar laboratory somewhere. Lee Cronin in England. Oh yeah, we're going to produce life within 5 years. We're going to produce a living cell. They're so far away from doing that, they're just simply bluffing people. But that's their belief system. They believe it to the core of their hearts. They believe this, and so they keep trying and trying. I'm an atheist. And then they follow that line of investigation and thought. How am I going to produce life? I know we can do it. This is called scientific optimism, hope against hope, shot in the dark. That's all it is. Because the more they learn about the cell and its complexity, which is obvious, it's practically like a big city with all different working parts and components in it, nanomachines and so on, the more they discover every year, the complex information systems, information processing systems within a cell, these things are all going on. They see it's getting harder and harder for them to come up with a pathway to producing a living cell. It's just it's an indomitable kind of problem they have. A great challenge. Mount Impossible, climbing Mount Impossible, or Mount Impossible. So even if they had the 4 building blocks of life, then they have to come up with how to hook them up together properly to produce functional molecules within the cell. That's another problem that they have no clue how to do. And how it would happen randomly is even a bigger challenge. That somehow or other randomly, these very specific arrangements of 3-dimensional molecules which fold into a functional, you can say a molecular machine, which goes around doing jobs fixing things, putting things together, catalyzing things. What are the probabilities that these things could fold perfectly? If they don't fold perfectly, an enzyme is produced within the cell based on information content, and it comes and chops it up, and they try to rebuild it again. This is all going on. Tell me how this is going. This is going on by random chance. How this came about. If the probabilities looks like there must be an intelligent designer behind our life systems and behind our cosmic systems, then why not go for it? Why not investigate the divinity, the possibility that God exists, and who is He, and what is His name, and what's His nature, what's the nature of God? Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Lord Brahma Samhita, that the Supreme Controller, if you go back, all the controllers back to the original, that is Krishna, and He is made of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. His body is inexhaustible. It doesn't die. It's not under influence of time. He's a creator of time, so He's a transcendental being beyond time, space, beyond time and space, beyond the elements. And He has put all this together to fulfill our desires. And we're born into illusion. Icha dvesha samutena dvandva mohena bharata. Krishna said the living entity is born into illusion, overwhelmed by the dualities of desire and hate. Samoha means bewildered. We're born and we're kind of bewildered. We think, oh, what's going on? Who am I really? And so on. So we need to be educated by the great sages, by the great acharyas, by those who have seen the truth. That is a real guru, tadvidi pranipatina. We have to accept instructions from a bona fide spiritual person, spiritual guru master. And he is a representative of God, Krishna. And that's how we receive this knowledge, in a disciplic succession. Otherwise, we can be lost. And if the soul is immortal, then when the body dies, where does the soul go? Big question. Krishna explains that in the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that urdvam gachanti shatvashta, if you die in goodness, if your mind is peaceful, you don't eat non-veg, you don't take alcohol, you're not greedy for material possessions, if you're in the mode of what is called sattva guna, or goodness, then you go to higher planets, or you can go back to God if you remember Him. Udvam gachanti sattvasta madhya tishtanti rajasa. If you die in the mode of passion, then you take birth amongst the fruitive workers, people who are simply concerned about material acquisition and egotism. And then tatapralinas tanath mudo janisi jayate. If you die in a mode of ignorance, influenced by ignorance, anger, hate, envy, killing animals slaughtered, that's a mode of ignorance, intoxication, mode of ignorance. So many ways you are cruel and completely ignorant of life's purpose. Mode of ignorance, and Krishna says, mudho jonisu jayate, you can take birth in the animal kingdom. So the soul goes up or down. It doesn't just go up like people think, oh, reincarnation. In my next life, I'm going to be the king of Saudi Arabia or something like that. I'm always going to be some king or queen or something great. No, it depends on your state of consciousness at the time of death. That's described by Krishna in the chapter 8 of Bhagavad Gita. Yam yam vapi smran bhavam charitayanti kalevaram tam tam ivanti kuntaya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. At the time of death, whatever you're thinking of, whatever you're addicted to is where your thoughts will go. If I'm addicted to struggling for my family and my children, I have to get them married. Oh, how much money do I have in the bank? This is all material consciousness, and you take birth again in the material world. And Krishna says, if you think of me, antavat tu palam, if you think of me at the time of death, then, or ante narayan shmiti, if you think of God at the time of death, then you take birth in the spiritual world where God lives, where God is eternally, where there's no death, no birth. Mamupecha punarjanma dukalayama shashvatam, place of no death, no temporality. That is where devotees of the Lord go if they develop their love for Krishna, love for God, love for Lord Narayan, Krishna. Then they go back to Him. So it depends on how you practice your life and what your priorities are in your life, and what the purpose of knowing the purpose of human life is. Not just eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and trying to increase the luxuries of life. Do these things in a more luxurious way, in a more prestigious way. The animals are doing eating, sleeping, mating, and defending also, but they don't have the privilege of questioning philosophically who I am, where I come from, where am I going to, and how is all this universe and life put together? Is there a supreme being? So that is the difference between a human being and an animal. Is the human being pursues his spiritual, divine journey, and at the time of death he remembers Krishna, God, Supreme Lord. Many different types of religions are there, and goes to the kingdom of God. But we have to practice it properly. We cannot think that we can outwit God by word jugglery, or reinterpret scripture, convolute the scripture. Many people say, oh, thou shalt not kill means murder. It doesn't mean kill. Or some people say, oh, we shouldn't kill the cow. That means desi cow. Indian cow is sacred. Cows in America or England, they're not sacred. You can eat the cow. No. We have to follow the scripture verbatim, perfectly, and don't misconstrue things. Therefore, we need a bona fide spiritual master and the bona fide scriptures, which is being presented by the Hare Krishna movement, ISKCON, which is spreading throughout the world. So that is my challenge to atheistic scientists, that they have no clue how life began. The theory of evolution, neo-Darwinism or Darwinism, has been exposed as flawed and faulty, and there are many anomalies there. Things just don't fit properly in their explanations. And so science is showing us that it didn't happen that way. So our alternative is there's a divine creator, a divine maintainer, and a divine destroyer as well, Lord Shiva. So Hare Krishna.